The 1970s was a decade where science fiction stopped being harmless space adventure and became dangerous cultural prophecy. What happens when movies dare to show governments collapsing, experiments on humans, or futures that felt too close to reality? Some were banned outright, some vanished into vaults, and a few resurfaced decades later to whisper their warnings. Let's journey into part 2 of cinema's forbidden visions. Number 15. A Boy and His Dog, 1975. At first glance, A Boy and His Dog seemed like just another offbeat sci-fi film from the mid-70s. Directed by L.Q. Jones and based on Harlan Ellison's novella, it told the story of a young wanderer named Vic and his telepathic dog, Blood, surviving in a devastated post-apocalyptic wasteland. What began as a cultish road picture quickly revealed something darker, an allegory of survival, corruption, and human depravity. The controversy started before it even premiered. Test audiences were divided. Some hailed it as brilliant satire, while others called it disturbing beyond belief. Its depiction of lawless gangs, underground societies breeding women for survival, and an ending so shocking that even Ellison himself publicly complained, ensured it wouldn't be embraced by mainstream audiences. Censors in parts of Europe banned it, claiming it degraded moral values. In the United Kingdom, screenings were cut or outright canceled after community protests. Behind the scenes, Jones clashed with both distributors and critics. The ending, intentionally grotesque, was defended as black comedy, but many saw it as indefensible cruelty. The backlash grew so strong that for years the film existed in a strange half-life, celebrated in underground screenings, yet dismissed as too dangerous for wider release. By the 1980s and 90s, however, the movie was rediscovered as a proto-Mad Max, influencing dystopian cinema that followed. Today, it's a cult classic, but one that still unsettles. Its legacy reminds us that sometimes the most controversial works force us to ask, how far would humanity fall when stripped of civilization's mask? Number 14. THX 1138, 1971. Before Star Wars, George Lucas shocked the industry with THX 1138. Based on his student film, this was no fairy tale saga, but a chilling vision of a sterile, computer-controlled future where individuality was outlawed. Robert Duvall starred as THX, a man who dares to rebel against a society addicted to sedation and ruled by faceless overlords. It was cold, clinical, and deliberately alienating. Exactly what made it so haunting. The controversy began almost immediately. Warner Brothers, nervous about its bleakness, slashed marketing support. In several countries, including Brazil and South Africa, the film was outright banned for its subversive undertones. Authorities claimed it promoted rebellion against state order. In the United States, it struggled for release. Some theaters refused to screen it, fearing walkouts. Viewers who expected escapism were met with oppressive silence, whitewashed walls, and a dystopia that hit uncomfortably close to home. Production was fraught. Lucas fought studio interference that demanded a clearer narrative. Editing disputes raged. Even Francis Ford Coppola, serving as producer, clashed with executives over its uncompromising tone. Critics at the time were divided. Some admired its audacity, others mocked it as pretentious. Audiences mostly stayed away, leaving it a commercial flop. But history had other plans. Rediscovered after Lucas's blockbuster success, THX 1138 was reappraised as visionary, influencing everything from Brazil to The Matrix. The film's suppression in its own time only amplified its myth. It stands as a reminder. Sometimes society bans what it most fears. The possibility that freedom requires breaking every rule. Number 13. Zardoz, 1974. When Zardoz premiered, audiences didn't know what to make of it. Directed by John Boorman and starring Sean Connery fresh off his James Bond fame, it promised futuristic spectacle. What it delivered was something stranger. A surreal meditation on immortality, control, and the decay of human spirit, set in a divided world where a stonehead god ruled the violent brutals. But here's the twist. The film's imagery was so bizarre that it caused outrage even before critics could analyze it. Connery's revealing costume was mocked, but what truly disturbed censors was the story's philosophical attack on religion and authority. In Ireland and parts of Spain, the movie was banned outright for its perceived blasphemy and destabilizing ideas. Even in the United States, screenings were limited, with audiences either walking out or booing at its avant-garde symbolism. Behind the camera, Borman faced ridicule from the studio, which had expected something more commercially viable. Instead, he crafted an art film disguised as sci-fi. Critics savaged it. Roger Ebert called it a failure of vision. Connery's reputation took a hit, and the film all but disappeared from mainstream cinema by the late 70s. And yet, as decades passed, Zardoz began to earn respect. Its warnings about elite societies hoarding power and technology feel disturbingly prescient today. Once banned and ridiculed, it's now dissected in film schools as a daring, if flawed, experiment. Sometimes the strangest failures end up whispering the darkest truths. Number 12. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Few films from the decade ignited such fury as Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. Based on Anthony Burgess's novel, it told the story of Alex DeLarge, a teenage delinquent who indulged in ultraviolence before being subjected to state mind control experiments. Stylish, hypnotic, and terrifying, it was hailed as genius by some and damned as poisonous by others. In Britain, it became infamous. Though it initially passed censors, a series of copycat crimes reported in the press sparked panic. Newspapers accused the film of corrupting youth. Under immense pressure, Kubrick himself asked Warner Brothers to withdraw it from circulation in the United Kingdom. For decades, it remained effectively banned there, its absence only deepening its legend. In Spain and South Korea, it was suppressed for being politically dangerous. Behind the scenes, Kubrick was shaken by the backlash. He received threats and retreated into reclusion. Critics were divided. Some praised its critique of free will and authoritarianism, while others condemned it as glorifying brutality. The public reaction was so intense that theaters faced protests and occasional vandalism. Its legacy, however, is undeniable. When it returned to UK cinemas in the early 2000s, younger audiences were stunned by how fresh it still felt. Once vilified and hidden, A Clockwork Orange became a timeless warning about state power, morality, and the fragile line between order and chaos. Suppressed visions, it seems, only grow sharper in the dark. Number 11. Fantastic Planet, 1973. This French-Czech animated masterpiece, directed by René Laloux, looked innocent at first glance. Otherworldly creatures, vivid colors, dreamlike music. But Fantastic Planet was anything but childlike. It depicted a future where humans, called alms, were enslaved by giant blue aliens known as drogs. Part allegory, part nightmare, it exposed themes of oppression, colonization, and revolt. Its beauty masked its danger. In several countries, including parts of Eastern Europe, it was banned for its political undertones. To communist governments, the story of a crushed people rising against their overlords felt like a veiled attack. Even in France, it faced attempts at suppression for being too disturbing for animation. Audiences expecting a whimsical cartoon were instead confronted with psychedelic images of control, cruelty, and rebellion. The production itself was chaotic. Laloux struggled with budget constraints, using cutout animation that gave the film its surreal, uncanny feel. Its Cannes debut in 1973 shocked viewers. Some walked out, while others praised it as a surreal masterpiece. Its disturbing imagery, humans kept as pets, hunted for sport, became iconic for those seeking darker, more intellectual science fiction. Though once hidden, Fantastic Planet has grown into a cult classic, beloved by animators and musicians alike. Its vision of rebellion against domination continues to resonate in every era of unrest, proof that sometimes the most dangerous revolutions begin not with violence, but with imagination. Number 10. Soylent Green, 1973. At first, Soylent Green appeared to be a routine dystopian thriller starring Charlton Heston, a man who by the early 70s had become synonymous with larger-than-life epics. But beneath its veneer of futuristic crime, drama lurked one of cinema's most haunting twists. Set in an overpopulated New York of the year 2022, it portrayed a planet ravaged by pollution, hunger, and authoritarian control. The film's shocking climax, revealing the true ingredients of the food ration, Soylent Green, rocked audiences. Some whispered about fainting in theaters. Others accused it of undermining trust in industry and government. In Japan, it faced censors wary of its parallels to their own food security anxieties. In parts of South America, screenings were restricted, reportedly due to fears of social unrest. Behind the camera, director Richard Fleischer fought studio hesitation. MGM, on the brink of financial collapse, hoped for a hit but worried about the ending. Even Heston lobbied to keep it intact, insisting its horror was the whole point. Critics were polarized. Some admired its boldness, others dismissed it as bleak exploitation. Religious groups condemned it, arguing that it attacked the sanctity of life. In time, however, Soylent Green became legendary. Its environmental warnings feel chillingly relevant, and its catchphrase, "Soylent Green is people," entered pop culture forever. Once feared as too controversial, it endures as a reminder that sometimes the scariest futures are simply logical extensions of our present. Number 9. Death Race. 2000. 1975. Produced by Roger Corman and directed by Paul Bartel, Death Race 2000 was marketed as cheap drive-in entertainment. What audiences got was a razor-sharp satire disguised as blood-soaked spectacle. The story followed a dystopian America, where a transcontinental road race rewarded drivers for running over pedestrians. It starred David Carradine as the iconic Frankenstein and a young Sylvester Stallone as his ruthless rival. But here's the twist. The carnage wasn't random. It was biting social commentary on authoritarianism, media manipulation, and America's obsession with violence. That didn't stop censors from panicking. In Australia and New Zealand, it was banned outright for excessive brutality. In Sweden, censors demanded deep cuts. Even in the US, moral watchdog groups lobbied for it to be pulled, accusing it of encouraging violence. Behind the scenes, the production was chaotic but fast. Corman's team shot the film on a tiny budget, with dangerous stunt work that left actors shaken. Carradine reportedly clashed with the crew over the campy tone, while Stallone used it as a springboard to fame. Critics largely despised it on release, calling it tasteless trash. Audiences, however, flocked to grindhouses. Over decades, Death Race 2000 transformed from a banned oddity into a beloved cult classic. Its parody of authoritarian spectacle now feels eerily prophetic in an age dominated by reality television and manufactured outrage. Once condemned as meaningless gore, it now stands as a brutal comedy about power, distraction, and the cost of entertainment. Number 8. Phase 4, 1974. On paper, Phase 4 sounded like a typical creature feature. Mysterious ants evolve intelligence and threaten human civilization. But in the hands of Saul Bass, Hollywood's most legendary graphic designer, it became something stranger and far more unsettling. This was not a monster movie, but a hypnotic meditation on evolution and control. The ants were portrayed as a collective intelligence, slowly dismantling humanity's dominance. Stunning macro photography made the insects appear terrifying and majestic. The ending, where humans and ants begin a forced integration, left audiences reeling. And that ending was the problem. Paramount executives panicked. The studio cut Bass's original conclusion, which was even more abstract and terrifying, and the movie struggled to find theaters. In the United Kingdom, certain regions banned it for psychological disturbance. In Eastern Europe, it faced restrictions for being too allegorical about collectivism. Behind the camera, Bass clashed with Paramount over creative freedom. His reputation as a designer couldn't protect him from accusations that the film was incomprehensible. Critics were bewildered. Audiences mostly stayed away. Bass never directed another feature, but over time, Phase War earned a cult reputation. In the 2000s, the lost ending resurfaced, reigniting debate. Today, it's celebrated for its daring vision and philosophical horror. Once dismissed as too disturbing, it now feels like a whispered prophecy about humanity's fragile place in nature. The ants, it seems, were never the real monsters. It was our fear of change. Number 7. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. When Nicholas Roeg released The Man Who Fell to Earth, audiences expected a stylish sci-fi adventure. What they got was a hallucinatory fever dream about loneliness, addiction, and corruption. David Bowie starred as Thomas Jerome Newton, an alien who arrives on Earth seeking water for his dying planet. Instead, he's consumed by wealth, power, and ultimately human weakness. The film immediately sparked controversy. Its disorienting structure, surreal imagery, and adult themes made it unlike any other science fiction of the decade. In Spain, it was banned for indecency and political subversion. In the United States, censors cut entire sequences before it could reach wider release. In Australia, community groups lobbied to block screenings, claiming it promoted moral decay. Behind the scenes, the production was equally chaotic. Roeg's directing style, fragmented, dreamlike, confused financiers. Bowie, struggling with his own demons during filming, gave a performance that critics couldn't decide was genius or breakdown. Reviews were divided. Some hailed it as visionary, others called it incoherent trash. And yet, with time, The Man Who Fell to Earth became iconic. Bowie's haunting alien. Portrayal, combined with Roeg's fractured storytelling, influenced filmmakers from Ridley Scott to Denis Villeneuve. Once banned and ridiculed, it now stands as a testament to how the most difficult art often carries the deepest truths. That alienation isn't from another world. It's born right here on ours. Number 6. God Told Me To, 1976. Directed by Larry Cohen, God Told Me To began as a modest independent film, but quickly became one of the most shocking sci-fi horrors of its era. The story followed a New York detective investigating a series of murders, all committed by people who claimed divine instruction. What began as a crime thriller spiraled into alien abductions, religious conspiracies, and humanity's darkest fears of faith manipulated. The film's blending of theology and extraterrestrial horror was too much for censors. In Ireland and the Philippines, it was outright banned. In Italy, it faced heavy cuts for blasphemy. Even in the United States, distributors refused wide release, claiming it would offend churches. Cohen's guerrilla-style production added to the film's notoriety. Shooting without permits on New York streets, he captured chaotic realism that unsettled viewers. The Catholic Church reportedly condemned the movie for portraying divine voices as alien trickery. Critics didn't know how to categorize it. Part detective noir, part sci-fi nightmare. Audiences, too, recoiled at its bizarre twists, particularly the revelation of humanity's hybrid origins. But like many of Cohen's works, its legacy only grew. Today it's hailed as a cult gem, admired for daring to question the foundations of belief and obedience. Once buried in censorship, God Told Me To whispers still relevant questions. If someone claims authority in the name of a higher power, who among us dares to doubt? Number 5. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978. Technically a remake of the 1956 classic, Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers wasn't just a retelling. It was a darker, more paranoid reflection of the late 70s. Starring Donald Sutherland, Brooke Adams, and Leonard Nimoy, it portrayed San Francisco residents replaced by emotionless alien doubles, a metaphor for conformity in an era of government distrust and social upheaval. Though praised by some critics, the film's sheer intensity caused waves of censorship. In South Korea, it was banned for undermining public morale. In Chile, under dictatorship, it was suppressed for its subversive undertones. Even in the United Kingdom, censors demanded edits to the horrifying pod people transformations. The production was uneasy. Kaufman's bleak tone clashed with studio expectations of a more commercial sci-fi. The cast reportedly struggled with the disturbing atmosphere, particularly in the film's harrowing finale, where Sutherland's scream became one of cinema's most chilling moments. Audiences walked out in shock. Critics described screenings as traumatizing, and yet history vindicated it. The 1978 Body Snatchers is now hailed as one of the greatest remakes ever made, its paranoia as sharp today as it was during the Cold War. Once feared and banned, it endures as a chilling reminder. Sometimes the monsters we fear most are the friends who suddenly stop being themselves. Number 4. Quintet, 1979. Robert Altman, the master of ensemble drama, shocked audiences when he turned to bleak science fiction with Quintet. Starring Paul Newman, it imagined a frozen, post-apocalyptic world where survivors spent their final days playing a mysterious board game that determined who would live and who would die. Audiences expecting Newman's charm were stunned by the oppressive imagery, endless ice wastelands, haunting silence, and an allegory of civilization reduced to nihilistic chance. Censors in several countries, including Argentina and South Korea, banned it, citing its portrayal of hopelessness as socially dangerous. Even in the US, distributors slashed screenings, claiming the film was unmarketable. Behind the scenes, Altman faced bitter studio resistance. His experimental style, long silences, distorted visuals through Vaseline-smeared lenses, confounded critics. Newman reportedly admitted he didn't fully understand the movie himself. Viewers left theaters bewildered, and box office numbers collapsed. But time has reframed Quintet. Once dismissed as an incoherent art film, it's now studied as a bold meditation on fate, control, and survival. Its banishment in parts of the world only enhanced its myth. Sometimes the coldest futures aren't about technology. They're about the games we're forced to play when hope is gone. Number 3. The Andromeda Strain, 1971. Adapted from Michael Crichton's novel, The Andromeda Strain presented a terrifyingly realistic vision. A deadly microorganism from space infects a desert town, and scientists must race against time to contain it. Directed by Robert Wise, it used sterile production design and documentary-style storytelling to make the horror feel all too plausible. The film's realism unsettled governments. In Mexico and parts of Eastern Europe, it was banned for inciting fear of scientific experimentation. In Japan, screenings were briefly halted after public anxiety over nuclear contamination tied its imagery to real-world fears. Its warning about technology and viruses hit too close to home in an age already rattled by Cold War paranoia. Production itself was meticulous. Wise demanded cutting-edge sets, realistic procedures, and technical consultation from NASA scientists. Yet this authenticity contributed to its controversy. Audiences whispered that it wasn't fiction, but a disguised warning. Some even believed the film had been suppressed in places to prevent panic. Though initially criticized for being too clinical, The Andromeda Strain gained cult admiration as the years passed. Its tale of invisible enemies and human hubris now feels prophetic. Once banned for being too convincing, it survives as a stark reminder that science fiction's scariest monsters often come not from the stars, but from within our own laboratories. Number 2. The Omega Man, 1971. Charlton Heston returned to apocalyptic storytelling with The Omega Man, adapted loosely from Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. This time, the world had been destroyed by biological warfare, leaving Heston's Robert Neville as one of the last survivors in Los Angeles, hunted by a cult-like group of mutated humans who rejected technology and embraced destruction. The film's clash of science and fanaticism drew immediate fire. In South Africa, it was banned for its subtext of race and segregation. In several Catholic countries, it faced cuts for depicting religious zealotry as madness. Even in the US, critics warned that its imagery of plague, isolation, and mobs carried too much resonance with contemporary unrest. Production was difficult. Warner Brothers executives were nervous about its bleakness, while Heston threw himself into the role with characteristic intensity. The film was savaged by many critics upon release, dismissed as pulp trash. Yet audiences, living through Vietnam, Watergate, and civil rights turmoil, saw something raw and frightening. Decades later, The Omega Man is viewed as a daring step in dystopian cinema. Its influence can be traced in everything from 28 Days Later to I Am Legend's later adaptations. Once banned and ridiculed, it remains a cultural marker, a warning about fear, science, and the fragile line between survival and tyranny. Number 1. Solaris, 1972. Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris was hailed by some as the Soviet answer to 2001, A Space Odyssey. But instead of sleek futurism, Tarkovsky offered a meditative, slow, and deeply unsettling exploration of memory, grief, and the human soul. Set aboard a space station orbiting a mysterious planet, It revealed how the planet manifested people's innermost guilt into hauntingly real figures. Though admired in the Soviet Union, Solaris faced bans in Chile, South Korea, and even temporary restrictions in France for being psychologically destabilizing. Some governments feared its abstract style encouraged anti-authoritarian thought. Others balked at its spiritual themes, which transcended both science and state ideology. Behind the scenes, Tarkovsky clashed constantly with Soviet authorities. They pushed for a shorter, more straightforward film. He resisted, determined to create cinema as poetry. The production was grueling, with studio interference threatening to shut it down. Critics at the time were divided. Some called it a masterpiece. Others nearly fell asleep. But history has crowned it one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made. Its haunting, meditation on grief and reality proved timeless. Ironically, the very qualities that led to its banning, the refusal to offer easy answers, its philosophical depth, are what secured its immortality. Solaris stands as proof that the most dangerous art is often the kind that asks us to confront ourselves. From frozen wastelands to alien minds, these banned visions of the 1970s show us what happens when science fiction dares to cross forbidden lines. Some were hidden, others mocked, yet all survive as warnings and revelations. Which of these controversial films do you think deserves rediscovery? Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.